Hello, boys. This is White Pill Media, and welcome back to the Trough. As per tradition for the new Trough videos, I did some baking. I made some chocolate chips. They turned out okay. I was kind of happy. I like making them bigger so I don't have to use the scoop so many times, Also, the gameplay in the background is Sons of the Forest. I should have a overview of that sometime. And there's going to be a longer intro. So you can skip it if you want. It should be like a minute. It's probably not funny, but I thought it was okay.
Oh, hi there.
Hey man, how's it going?
Haven't seen you around the dog park before. I bet you could use a friend.
Thanks, man. I'm Phil.
Hey, Phil.
It's actually my first time here, and it's a little daunting, to be honest with you.
Anytime, man. So, let me ask you a question. You're a purebred, right?
Yeah, my mom was a Papillon, and so was my dad, so I guess so, yeah.
That's great. 100%, that's what I'm talking about. Purebreds.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what's nice is when there's another purebred and we can kind of talk about the mutts.
Mutts.
Non-purebreds.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but real quick, what is that right there? Is that a birthmark?
You know, it's just a little marker I got just to, let people know where I'm coming from.
No,
Tattoo.
this is great. I think I'm good. I'm just gonna head over to the water.
All right, I'll see you around, Phil.
No.
You're the man.
No.
Good friend right there.
We're not. I don't know this guy.
Hey, everyone.
No.
This guy's with me.
No, I am not with him. I want it to be clear, I'm not with this guy.
Hey, Phil.
No.
My buddy Phil.
No.
This week, I got a few things to talk about. It's not what I typically do, where I try to find a few indie books. I broke it up with a few other things I just kind of had around, but I have the Jackalopians, which is indie. We have A Good Man is Hard to Find and Other Stories by Flannery O'Connor, Medieval Ireland by Michael Richter, and the graphic novel of Watership Down. What do all these have in common together? Nothing. Nothing. And this is a pretty mixed trough where I like the graphic novel for Watership Down, and I'm going to speak on that briefly, not super long. I did not like A Good Man is Hard to Find and Other Stories. I really did not like Medieval Ireland, and I'm somewhat mixed on the Jackalopians. There's definitely a lot that I like in it, but some stuff I don't really care for. And I always want to be honest with these reviews because otherwise I don't really see the point. And I wanted to have a little preface where I go off on a tangent for a bit when I'm discussing something in the Jackalopians. And if you're listening to this, that means I probably left it in. I just wanted to say it did not overall color my thoughts on the book. But yeah, I went off on a little tangent, so I was just a little preface there. So Watership Down, it's this very famous story. It's by Richard Adams. It's about these rabbits. They are leaving their warren to go set up a new warren in Watership Down. It's great. It has great themes. It's wonderful. I have not read the book of it, but I have seen the movie a few times, loved it. I really like this. I definitely want to read the book. So I have some thoughts on that. Good Man is Hard to Find. This is a collection of short stories. Overall, not a fan of them. I will get into more depth about Flannery O'Connor when I talk about it. And then Medieval Ireland. That one is a history of, medieval Ireland, right? And it's very boring, and there wasn't a lot of information I found very useful, so I did not care for it. And the Jackalopians. This is about a young man who works in Washington, D.C., a Trump supporter, conservative, but he's a bit of a little cuck on the COVID stuff. And he ends up finding a group of young guys, and they worship something called a jackalope. And he ends up joining their meeting, and then things kind of spiral out of control with just current year. And there's an event where a yard sign is set on fire, and everything goes a little crazy. Those are the books. Timestamps below. I'll have links to purchase. I guess 2 links. It'll be for Jackalopians and Watership. The others, fuck them. They suck. So I'm going to have spoilers for all these books. For the Jackalopians, I'm mixed on it because I kind of questioned points of view and that type of thing. I also questioned some believability within the book. But there were definitely comedic parts that I liked, and I think I'd probably read more by this author. We're going to start with the Jackalopians. This is the main feature. This is going to be the main feature for today. And yeah, like I said, it's about this guy that works in DC. One thing where I almost just set the book down and didn't finish it, and this happened like very early, it's like we're in Washington, D.C., right? We're in Washington, D.C., and the setting is not utilized. I felt that the author really made a mistake here because at no point in this, I read this whole book, and at no point do the characters go to Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria and order a small cheese pizza with some extra virgin olive oil. That never happens. You know, there is no Comet Ping Pong Pizza, nothing. It's such a fucking mistake. I don't know what the author's problem is. It was right there. It was right there. You could have used it. He didn't do anything with it. You could have had a guy walk in with the AR-15 and fire a couple rounds. Didn't do any of that shit. Whatever. Okay, but besides that, we will now get into the book. Our back cover, it lists James Leroux, or James Leroux, also known as Haji Leroux. It means if you're a Muslim and you've gone to Mecca to pay pilgrimage or whatever the fuck, you get the title Haji, right? So James Leroux is a Haji because he went out west to go like to the town where the Jackalope was founded. So I'm just going to use James and Haji interchangeably, and he is not our protagonist. And that's a point of contention I had because our protagonist, who's the young lawyer guy, is Daniel Smith, and he's a junior attorney. Daniel Smith, like I said, he's a conservative guy. He's a Trump supporter, I guess kind of a normie con. I guess, yeah, that's a fine way to call him. But he's doing this Zoom call thing, and like a little email notification saying like, hey, you donated Donald Trump pops up, and he freaks out, and this guy, James Leroux, who's a part of the Zoom call, sees it, and then he later contacts Daniel about it because like, hey, Daniel seems like an okay guy. And like, if this is the story of James Leroux, because on page 4, Daniel even says, this is the story of Haji Leroux. Well, I don't think we really need Daniel because Daniel's not even like very close to James, and we'll get into that more. Story takes place in 2021, 2022. Our main character graduated in 2019, and he's like walking around DC, and he even looks at the White House, and he's like, that's where Donald Trump still reigned. And I guess this is a MAGA book. I don't know if this is unironic or not. I'm not really sure on this side of things. You know, you don't really know. There's so many levels of irony. I don't know. I'm not really a Trump guy myself, but yeah, okay.
I don't see why you guys hate us Judeo-Christians so much.
So our first 50 pages are about Daniel's life. This is back when like COVID, this is with BLM, this is with all this shit is going on with Antifa, and he has his girlfriend Katie, and he is still hung up about her in 2021. So we flip around a bit during time, right? Because like the book is starting like 2021, but he like reflects on his girlfriend Katie, and that's like 2019 or so, like around there. Does that make sense? A lot of this is about COVID stuff. A lot of it is about, you know, Daniel's like, while he supports Trump, he's really like, oh no, he really thinks COVID's like a super virus kind of a deal. And he pushes her away and says they have to quarantine with each other. This felt a little overdone. Like, it's not just a 2-week separation for them. He keeps it going, like, for months and months and months. And it's just like, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if a guy would really do that. He might do the 2 weeks thing. But I guess some people were probably like this, you know? Like, I guess even because he's supposed to be like a normie con. But it felt like it stretched the believability where he's spending months away from his girlfriend, even though they've already quarantined. So there was that. But on page 30, we're getting into like the George Floyd stuff. And it's like, so far it's been like 30 pages of, it's like COVID, it's George Floyd, it's like BLM. And it's like, aren't these people kind of ridiculous? Isn't this kind of insane? And it just feels like a lot of red meat for this side, and it also just feels like a lot of stuff we already know. Like, our character's already, like, conservative, right? Our character already doesn't like this stuff. Maybe the COVID shit, I guess. But he doesn't even really change over that either. And it feels like, I don't know, it feels like a little like, I don't know, it too much. Like, he ends up following a crowd of Antifa to the White House on page 35. Some Antifa guy say the names of, like, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, some other blacks. Someone says to put your fucking mask on, Karen, and it just feels like maybe this is believable. I know there's a lot of crazy shit. I know there's a lot of like that, but it felt like, I don't know, like it kind of, I know it's like kind of an absurdist story, right? Because you have a bunch of guys worshiping a jackalope, but it felt like it pushed that boundary for me, where it's like I got a little taken out of the story. But they even have like a Ave Maria playing over the crowd, and then one guy, like the Wolf, who's a member of Antifa, who has bad breath. He has something called halitosis, which apparently means bad breath. I didn't know that. So, someone who doesn't know what halitosis is going to offer critique on this book. So take that for what it's worth. Overall, it just felt too much. And then like the Wolf guy farts into like a megaphone, and it blasts through the square. And yeah, it's just like, okay, it's been like 40 pages and I wouldn't say too much has happened because I don't really care about Daniel that much. I don't really care about his girlfriend Katie because she just seems like a bitch that cheated on him. So it's like whatever. But on page 40, James gets in contact with Daniel, and he says like, hey, you seem like a cool dude. So why don't you come hang out with me and some friends? I'll introduce you to a few guys. Whatever, it could be a good time. He's like, that sounds fine, because he doesn't really have anything else, because without Katie, he just works, he watches porn, he orders food to his apartment, and that's it. That's all he has going. So he has a meeting with Scott, who is James's good and close friend. He went to college with him and all that. Kind of felt like Scott could have been our protagonist. I'll get into that more, but someone who's closer to James, because this is James's story, and Scott's a closer character to James than Daniel is, for sure. Initially, Daniel's a little weirded out. He's asking, did you guys storm the Capitol on J6? Are you with the Oath Keepers? Who the fuck are the Oath Keepers? I don't know. There's so many different little fucking groups. I don't know. Asked if they're with the Proud Boys. Asked if they're some kind of Nazis. And then he brings up Richard Spencer. That dude's fucking gay. I've always thought he was a fucking fag. Same with Steven Crowder. That guy's 100% a homosexual. Just with how he talks, his mannerisms, all of it. That dude's a fucking fag. Anyways, we're back to the book. So apparently they're not Nazis or whatever. They're just guys that hang out and they're like vaguely right-wing, I guess. And on page 51, I feel like the book is kind of finally started. I felt like a lot of the early stuff, like the COVID and the George Floyd stuff, it's like, I know this. I think the people reading this know this. So I felt like a good amount of it could have been trimmed. Because it's just like, I don't know. Like, you saw it on the news. Like, you know what it was like. But we had the first Jackalope meeting. And there is a lot of good humor in this book. I think I've been dogging on it a little bit so far, and I don't mean to. But we have the first Jackalope meeting, and this is a bunch of people. They have like a stuffed jackalope, which is like a little rabbit with horns. It's a fake animal. Obviously, I want to say obviously, it's not a real thing out in the wild. And they have like this little stuffed jackalope. They have a flag. They pay homage to it. They talk about heresy, where it's like some people, they think the flying jackalope, which is like a variation, is cool. This one guy, Sneedman, good name, he views this as heresy. And Wolpertingerism, which is like a flying jackalope, and Sneedman hates it while others like it. There's this woman, Dorothy Sawyer, who lives way out west, and they kind of view her like the Pope because she's like with the tourism board or whatever. They like keep the jackalope mythology and stuff kind of running. Like it's just a big gag out there. But we have this meeting, and it's really funny. Like, Sneedman is like really losing his fucking mind during the meeting because everyone's there just kind of having fun and joking around about the jackalope, and they're drinking, they're talking, they're just taking a break from all the political crap. And Sneedman doesn't get it. He takes it way too seriously, and this is really life or death for him. So, funny. Like, this is good. This was good stuff. I was like 70 pages into the book, and I was questioning, like, I don't know what the plot is exactly. I don't know what the plot is exactly because this is the story of James LaRoe, and it's like, we really haven't gotten there. You know, we're just kind of meandering. I don't really care about Daniel. I don't know. I just don't find him like really interesting. Like, and he's just like pathetic in a way, which isn't like funny either. It's just more of like contemptible. Like, I don't know. I feel contempt for him, not like humor. And he's like, he's a funny little dude. Whatever. I don't know. Because it takes us a while to get to the first Jackalope meeting. But on page 74, we have this line. We don't need an outlet to talk about politics anymore. We need an outlet to escape from it. The Jackalopians does that. Jackalopes are more fun. So I guess that's the plot. On page 74, he'll just come out and say, this is the plot. And like the start of the book is like boring and depressing. We're going through all the political shit. Maybe that was the point, right? Maybe that was the point. And then ta-da, we got to it. You know, it's a little meta, and now we're at the fun and interesting part that's not supposed to be really political. But while it does say that, the book doesn't really stay with it. It's not like really absurdist. There's still humorous parts later on, but like there's this creeping politics and culture that eventually like penetrates the Jackalopian meetings and all that. So it doesn't like stay with that premise, and maybe that's also the point as well, where it's like you might want to go have fun and relax and get away from it all, but you just can't in the modern world. I don't know. I find that kind of fucking depressing. But anyways, we have Daniel trying to bring up Joe Biden on page 77, and no one gives a shit. Like, Sneedman does not give a fuck. No one at the meeting gives a fuck. They don't want to talk about politics. They don't want to talk about any of this crap. They just want to talk about the jackalopes. You know, they just want to drink. They just want to do anything else but talk about politics. And I can appreciate that. At the end of the meeting, the end of the chapter, he is still obsessed with Katie. He calls her, leaves her a voicemail, and then he pulled his mask on and descended into the metro. Ooh, he descends. You know, he also took a picture of Katie that got a lot of likes on Instagram, you know, and he reflects on that. I don't get it. Like, Katie cheated on him like multiple fucking times. You know, she's kind of a whore. But I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of white pill media for you, I guess. This is the story of James LaRoe. The book says this multiple times on the back cover, on the second page. And then from page 86 to 160, a whole 74 pages, this is Scott, the guy that talked with Daniel in the restaurant, and he talks to him in another restaurant. This is Scott telling Daniel James LaRoe's entire life story. We don't get this from James. We don't just sit down with James and Daniel. Why do we need Daniel? But we get the whole life story from birth to where we are now, basically. And they're just sitting in this restaurant. They're talking about, you know, just growing up, the Iraq War. James is a good Catholic boy. Went to college, you know, it's supposed to be a Catholic college. It wasn't really Catholic. It's very left-leaning and subversive. There was some priest there called Father Slippentine. That's a good name. Getting like all of this information. It's this big biography, and we're just sitting in this restaurant. While all this is going on and James is going through this, he ends up losing his faith. You know, he used to be a Catholic. Now he's not really a Catholic. Doesn't believe in anything, and that's why he's kind of started worshiping the jackalope, right? Because it's a new kind of belief system. On 113, Scott's telling us about this time James was in college, and Father Slippentine washes the feet of some black students. And he also has the white students also line up to wash the feet of the black students. And I know, like, I think shit like this did happen around George Floyd. I don't really watch the news. I listen to some podcasts, and I kind of get my news filtered through that, you know. Otherwise, I don't look at anything mainstream. I don't care. I know they just hate me and want to kill me. So I don't really know any of that. And it just felt like, is this believable? Did this happen? This is also just felt like a little bit of like pushing the believability envelope to me, which maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this did happen. But some of James's backstory is he meets a really nice girl, and they're traveling around the country because she has to move, and they end up meeting some bikers. And these bikers, they have it's weird, it's absurdist, it's funny. It's like the first Jackalope meeting, and I liked it a lot, where this biker, his Jackalope was stolen by another rival biker gang, and they both sell motorcycles, and James has to be a part of their plot to go get the jackalope back, and he gets completely involved with it, and it's funny. It's funny. It's good. I like this. And so I don't like hate all of it, but it is like a sizable chunk of the book has nothing to do with Daniel. And it's like, okay, this is James' story, cut Daniel, or give me Scott's POV and it'll be Scott talking about Haji or something. Like, I don't know. Just bring me closer to the action, I want to say, because we're already removed because, we're reading the fucking book, right? So bring me closer to the action. Page 160. 160. It's over. On 160, we're done with the biography. However, I did want to... So if I left it in, then I said I went off on a tangent. So if you heard that at the beginning, then this is the part where I get into a tangent. I'll probably have a timestamp where you can bypass this tangent. And I feel like I probably went off a little too much. But yeah, whatever. I left it in. So this is Scott talking, and Scott is like a Trump supporter like everyone else there. And they're talking about Trump. They're talking about all this political stuff. And they also mention the time when Haji composed the Jackalopian national anthem right after the Charlottesville rally, which we watched in growing dread on CNN. As I watched cartoon Nazis in Stahlhelms parade through the streets of the southern town, I knew only 7 months into the Trump administration that one way or another the left would win in the end. They had finally gotten what they wanted. Genuine Nazis to browbeat us about. Even better, one of their own had died, so now they had a martyr whose blood they could parade forever. And then it goes on. With each setback, we retreated further into this other world with the Jackalopians. My point of contention is, are we talking about Seville? Are we going to talk about Seville? Oh boy. I think we will, just a bit, boys. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Seville and everything that went on with that. I was not there. It was kind of before my time and everything, but I felt I should address it. And I don't know, I'm not like super worked up about the cartoon Nazi thing, but I feel like I want to talk about it. White Pill Media does not have any face tats. White Pill Media does not roll with the face tats. White Pill Media does not have any tattoos. White Pill Media does not dress up or any of that. I don't think that's very effective, and I don't really want to do that. However, I don't know if I fully believe in the no enemies to the right thing, but if we can draw a comparison between, your average kind of leftist, your kind of democratic leftist guy, not necessarily an Antifa guy, but they do not, they might not like the average Antifa person or BLM or whatever, but they don't attack them. Maybe they don't outright approve of them, but they never attack them. The left never attacks Antifa. The left never attacks BLM, even though they commit a lot of crimes. Like, if the right wing was guilty of like 1/10 of all of the crimes that the left wing said they were guilty of, that'd be something. That'd be something, but they're just not. They don't commit crimes like the left does. And I know some of them do, and I'm not defending that, but I'm saying that while I don't believe in the whole dressing up and all that, I will say that it doesn't matter if you do the whole dress up thing or not. And it doesn't matter if you're like conservative or on this side of things and you don't really like these people. You don't gain anything by attacking them. The left never capitulates to the right. They will never attack BLM. They will never attack Antifa to try to win points with the conservatives because they don't gain anything. They don't give a fuck, right? As long as the people on their side hate white people, and that's what it is. It's about hating white people. Then they don't really care if they do a bunch of really bad shit. And I'm not saying I would defend that. I wouldn't. I wouldn't defend like people just committing crimes and shit, obviously, because that's illegal, and I'm not encouraging you to commit crime. But I don't think that's very honorable. I don't think that's very good. And I don't know. I kept being drawn back to the cartoon Nazi thing. It's like, well, I would not like really march with those guys. We're all wearing the same uniform, and it's the uniform that you can't take off, and your skin is the uniform. And it doesn't matter if you have these symbols or not, like a Confederate flag or a swastika or whatever. If you don't have any of that and you're just some white guy that, hey, I don't want to be, exterminated, you'll still be labeled a Nazi, right? It doesn't matter if you reject these symbols or not, or anything like that. All that really matters is that you're wearing the uniform and that's white and you can't take that uniform off. And everyone wearing that uniform has to be killed. And that's really what they want. That's not a hyperbole. That's not an exaggeration. Every man, woman, and child wearing that uniform has to be killed. Just how the media spun Seville. And I wasn't there personally, right? One person died. It was a morbidly obese woman, and she was hit by a car, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. The one person who died there was Heather Hare, a big fat cunt, and she was hit by James Field Jr. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding it when it came out, like, did he actually hit her with the car? Did she die of a heart attack? From what I looked up, it seemed like the medical examiner proved that she was indeed hit by the car, and he hit a few other people. But if you look online at any of their sources, it's like this guy, this crazy kid just drove into a crowd of people just trying to kill everyone. And he was like 20 when it happened. He was like 20 when it happened. He ended up pleading guilty because they threatened him with the death penalty. I personally think he was being attacked when he drove his car into the crowd of people and he was trying to get away. I think that's what happened, you know. I think that's what happened. The cops were standing around. They weren't fucking doing anything. They were helping the left, you know, as they just attacked people and beat them to death. And you know what? I think he was just a kid and he fucking panicked. He panicked. He was afraid for his life. And the police wouldn't have done anything if they dragged him out of his car and they beat him to death. If James Field had been killed that day, no one would have gone to jail. And that's just a fucking fact. So I don't think he really did anything wrong, personally. But with the left, he is doing like over 400 years in jail. And because he pled guilty, because they threatened him with, you know, the death penalty, he can never get out. He is never getting out. He's doing over 400 years in jail. So I objected quite strongly to the cartoon Nazi thing, because I don't think he's a cartoon Nazi. He's a 20-year-old white kid, and he got in a bad situation, and he fucking panicked, and now he's gone forever, right? He's gone forever. I just want to talk about that, and I don't really defend. I think the people that were doing Seville were a little naive, and they thought, like, at least the police would be just kind of neutral. That didn't happen. I think it was just very naive on some of the guys that organized it. I don't really like the people there. Definitely some people who probably should have gone to jail, or, you know, it was like the people I don't like Richard Spencer, Anglin, Cantwell, that fat fuck. He's collaborated so many fucking times with the feds. Plenty of other people there too who, weirdly enough, they're not doing any time. But like people like James Fields Jr. and other people who are just decent working class people, they did time for this shit, right? But it's not like the guys that were kind of setting it up. They didn't do any fucking time. Weird how that works. No jail time for some of those guys. Wow, that's fucking magic. I care about James Field Jr. I care about the other people that kind of just got caught up in this shit. Not that there aren't bad actors there, but, you know, Jackalopians, it goes and talks about the J6 and all the shit that those people have been through, and that's also really fucking bad. But it feels like there's this very hard line between Seville being cartoon Nazis and J6 being those poor Trump supporters. And I agree. A lot of poor, just working class, angry people, and they were treated horrifically for just walking around a fucking building, and Ashley Babbitt was killed. And it just feels like you're cutting off this hand, you know, by throwing away these bad right-wingers. You're cutting off this hand for the left to get rid of this cancer. But that doesn't work, because the whole body is cancer to them. The whole white body is cancer to them, and they're not happy until it's all dead. Capitulation isn't winning. And while maybe white pill media doesn't really want to roll with the face tats and all that, I don't want to roll with the faggot conservatives who actually love gays and trannies and every race except for white. And yeah, of course conservatives support gay marriage. Why wouldn't we? We've always felt that way. And I don't really want to go with the modern conservatives, right? I don't want to stand with those guys either. And the whole, well, of course we're against illegal immigration, but millions of legal immigrants, that's perfectly fine. I mean, as long as they're Catholic. And another point I'll bring up is that we had the Nashville shooting, right? The fucking tranny went into this Christian school and shot a few white kids, right? And the mainstream media They made the victim out to be the fucking tranny shooter. What symbols were these kids waving around? What costumes were they wearing? They weren't little Nazis. They were just white kids. And the media didn't give a fuck because they were white, because that's their uniform. So it doesn't matter, right? And it's like, if you want to compare Charlottesville, where it's like right-wingers are being attacked by the left and the cops aren't doing anything, and this kid panics and drives into a crowd of people, and we want to compare it to something like Waukesha. He drives into the Christmas parade at Waukesha, and he, kills a bunch of white people, including some kids, right? And they try to frame it as like a car accident, like it wasn't a big fucking deal. But the Charlottesville kid, he's like this murderous, he's this terrorist, he's this horrible human being, right? There's no sympathy, there's no fair, unbiased portrayal there. Waukesha is, it was an accident, or maybe he lost control of the vehicle, or anything. And it's like the left just has this monopoly on violence, and it fucking pisses me off. And it's like J6 had better optics, right? No one was waving a swastika around. It was just a bunch of angry boomers, right? But the media still treats it as the same as Charlottesville, right? You're still called a Nazi if you went to the Capitol, right? You still are. So it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. I'm not saying you have to take on symbology you don't want to take on. I don't think anyone should be forced to do that. But you act like the media is going to give you a fair shake if you don't, and that's just not true. So sorry about that. I know that was a rant, and that definitely went on longer than I wanted, but I felt like I wanted to say something for like James Fields, right? He's a fucking kid, and he's gone for life. Now we're in part 2 of the book. We have Daniel. He's still kind of a little cowardly guy. He ends up meeting Katie again because he's still really hung up on her, and it's weird. Like she like has. Daniel ends up fighting like Katie's current boyfriend in the streets, and she's like, oh no, they're fighting over me. And that's like a little funny, but I don't find it like super funny because I don't really like Daniel too much. And then he meets Katie later, and she's kind of like jerking him off in a restaurant. I think there's a fine balance between like funny and interesting, or just like it comes across as pathetic. This came across as kind of pathetic for me. So on 183, this is 4 months since the last time Daniel saw Scott, and we get another story. It goes on from 183 to 308, where Scott is telling Daniel everything that's going on in James's life and everything that they've been through recently. It's like, okay, we're still like pretty removed from it. So it's like a big chunks of this book are just a character telling Daniel about things that James is up to, even though he's not really good friends with James, I wouldn't say. Been a lot of trouble. There's been a lot of hubbub in the news that Daniel didn't know about, but apparently their one friend from the Jackalopians club, the Baron, Spanish guy, his family owns like a plantation in Colombia, and he was trying to impress some chicks by doing this like trick with a cigarette, and he ends up burning down one of those yard signs, in this house we believe, that type of crap. He burned it down. And then the media spun it into the KKK committing a hate crime, even though he's like Spanish, Hispanic kind of a deal. But they don't know it's him. They had just one blurry like photo of him, and he's like on the run now. The Baron is hiding out in James's apartment building, and Scott's a part of it, and they're just trying to smuggle him out of the country. So they contact the Baron's uncle, and he's going to come in a sailboat and bring him back down to Colombia, okay? But to keep up appearances, they still go to the Jackalopian meetings, even though Daniel didn't go to this meeting. I don't know why. I don't think there's really a reason, because the Jackalopian meetings are supposed to be monthly, but even though like Daniel hasn't gone to any of them since the first one, I don't really know why. But we have a good meeting here. I wanted to bring this up on 212 because Sneedman actually went out west to go get like a official notice declaring that like the flying jackalopes are actually heresy from these people who just think it's like a funny joke. The staff refused to unlock them no matter how loudly I screamed and pounded on the doors, and even though I could see them all sitting at their desks through the windows and refusing to look up. And Sneedman drove all the way out there, and he's just a fucking psycho, and he's just talking to some of the people there, and it turns out that some out-of-town lunatic has been harassing President Sawyer through all this just to get a denunciation of the flying jackalope. But he actually put together that the Baron is actually the one the media is calling the KKK guy. So he's like, hey, I will reveal this information unless you denounce the flying jackalope right now and declare me like your president for life. So they do it. They go through with it. Seaman's great. But the next chapter, I like this. This was funny. It's supposed to be like really dramatic because James is like banished from the club and all of his friends are banished from the club. And it's Sneedman's thing now. But James just says, oh, we can just reschedule the meetings. So the whole coup situation came across as more dramatic than it actually was. But they end up running into Emma, who is the Baron's kind of on again, off again girlfriend. Like they're dating, I guess they're having sex. And they tell her that they don't know anything about the Baron. And she says, I don't believe you. Believe me, I can tell these kinds of things. I'm a Pisces. So they end up bringing Emma back to the Baron. The plan is still the same, except now Emma is going with him to Columbia. But Scott ended up going to the Baron's house because he needed to bring some belongings for the Baron out of there. But he ended up being jumped by some Antifa guys, the same Antifa members from before, where they're Antifa, they're furries and all that. And they are following Scott. And I like this where they're being chased. He's being chased by the community safety squad. And I think it's the wolf. He shoves past a young pregnant woman, knocking her into the street as he charged ahead. Out of the way, community safety squad coming through. Scott's trying to get on the metro. And he stops at the turnstile. Oh, God, I thought, where was my Metro card? And then a little ways down, Nazi, Nazi, stop that Nazi. Without pausing, they all jumped the turnstile and sprinted towards the escalator. So there's good humor. There is like that part I like. Scott talks about there are people whose only crime was protesting in the Capitol building on J6 who had been sitting in a DC dungeon only a few miles from here for 8 months. They talk about the guards and all the abuse they inflicted on the people. And later down, he says, and they like to hurt them for no other reason. They like to see them in pain. And the out-group they hate so much, it isn't only the people who walked in the Capitol on J6. It's people like you and me. It doesn't matter that we haven't committed any crimes that we're technically right. They're out to destroy the Baron. And if we get in the way, they'll just crush us now and find the justification later. I agree with this. I don't think the author would apply this to Seville, where a lot of the people there were just protesting the removal of the General Lee statue. A lot of people there were just doing that. And I will agree that they hate the out-group very much, and it's not just because they're conservative. It's not just because they don't think the same way. It's because of their skin, and it's because of the uniform. And nothing's going to stop that, ever, 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 ever. It turns out the Antifa followed Scott back to the apartment, so they know where they're hiding. So when they are moving the Baron to try to get him to the coastline, we have this car chase with these Antifa furries. And that made sense that they were able to follow Scott back into the apartment. That worked because it was from the alleyway. There's a chase scene, and then they got to the apartment. That's fine. But they even have like a gun battle where they're like throwing luggage at the Antifa guys as they like shoot at them. And then the Antifa guys end up crashing and they end up driving away for several hours. And they lose them on page 283, right? And then 284, several hours have passed. It's now midday. So several hours have passed since the Antifa guys crashed and they have no way to track them. They have no idea where they are, and then they have several more hours of driving until they get to the coast, and then Emma and the Baron, they leave with the uncle, and they're off to Columbia. And then on page 296, the Antifa guys show up. They just know exactly where they are on this dark beach, and this does not work. This is not believable for me whatsoever. I think that maybe if you just threw in a line that the Antifa guys left a tracker on the guys, like if they put a tracker in like the bags that Scott was carrying to bring to the Baron, or they put something on the car or whatever, that would make sense to me. That would work. But there's no line like that because somehow after several hours have passed, they just know where they are. And that doesn't work for me. They have a little fight on the beach. Scott and James are able to escape while the Antifa guys get like captured by the police. And so we had 125 pages, 183 to 308, and Daniel isn't a part of any of it. So on page 309, this is another kind of issue I have. The police did get the Baron's cell data. They realized that he had been hiding in Haji's building, but they never figured out the room. They searched through every floor, knocking door to door. Haji even invited them into the apartment to have a look around. But by that time, the Baron was long gone. So the police, they know for a fact that the Baron was hiding in this apartment building, or at least his cell phone was, but you could assume that the Baron was there, right? You can make that assumption, right? You can make that assumption. And on 310, so I said those Antifa guys had been captured by the police. The squad was caught about as red-handed as you can get. There was a bunch of shell casings, guns, bats, knives with their fingerprints on them, but there's no motive. Who are they shooting at? What happened? As far as I know, I guess this depends on the state, just having a bat, just having a knife in your possession is not illegal. It's not illegal what crime has happened. I understand that they do have the gun, they have empty shell casings, so they can, say that, hey, you were firing this gun off. What damage has been done? What's been shot? Who's been hurt? Who's been killed? There has to be someone filing charges against them. Who's the victim? They fired a gun off. I guess that's maybe reckless discharge. I don't know exactly of gun laws, but I don't know exactly what you're charging them with, but it just says that they were caught about as red-handed as you can get. And I'm like, okay, what's the crime though? Like, one guy fired the gun off a bit, no one was hurt, and no one filed a complaint. So what are the charges exactly? And then apparently they even say that they were fighting white supremacists who were trying to get the Baron out of the country, but most people just made fun of it. And I questioned that as well, because it's like, okay, if you went to the cops, because they know, or another point, they know where Scott's apartment is. They know where Scott's apartment is. They've been there. They could identify Scott by the face, right? And police also know that the Baron was in that cell building. So if the Antifa guy said, hey, we know who was hiding the Baron, we know what apartment they were in, right? I feel like it makes it a little messy, but it doesn't work that these guys are going away for jail. And it says that they were caught trying to murder someone in the state's top vacation destination. And I'm like, okay, but who are they trying to murder? There's no body. There's no body. No one's saying that they tried to murder me. So I don't know. That doesn't exactly work for me. I feel like the Antifa guys would like trade information to get a lighter sentence. Like, hey, we know where these white supremacists are at. And at the very end, we have Daniel. He's torn between the Virgin Mary and Katie the whore, and he chooses God. And I don't really give a fuck. I don't know. It's not Daniel's story, right? So I feel like Daniel really didn't have enough page presence for me to care that he's choosing like God instead of Katie. It's like, I don't know. I don't think there's enough time for him. I felt like he wasn't involved in the story enough for me to care. And it's like, he's not a friend of James. I didn't feel that way. He's just a guy that he met like once, there's like the Zoom meeting, the Jackalope meeting, but Daniel's probably a better friend to Scott than to James. So I would say there were definitely parts where believability was kind of an issue for me, like especially the ending. The police have the cell data and the Antifa guys know what apartment they were in and then how they find them on the beach, like those kind of issues. Also, like the beginning was a little slow. It's a little meandering. It's like, I know this stuff. The humor's good. I felt that Daniel's cuttable, bring me closer to the action, bring me closer to James. If this is James's story, bring me close to James. And I don't know, would I read more by this author? I guess. I'm not really a Trump supporter type of guy. There's enough things that we're on the same side of. Yeah, I'd probably check out more, I guess, because he did the humor well. He did the humor well. Also, I want to talk about Small Scraps and the Jackalopians. Small Scraps is just like little editing mistakes that I saw I thought I'd bring up. I don't do it to be petty. I don't know. I see things, I note them. Page 54. Carnahan looked over at her and added, I would think. Page 200. There's just a extra space between all that you and most revered Haji. There seems to be an extra space between most and revered on page 210. But then I saw Todd Sneedman enter the room clutching another poster board. Get rid of the A. And 212. I found all the locals abuzz with chatter. It turns out some that out-of-town lunatic has been harassing President Sawyer. Just put that before the sum. And that's it. Now, everything else in the Trough, I don't really give a fuck about. And I don't really give a fuck about. I like Watership Down. I'll speak more on that. But A Good Man is Hard to Find. I didn't like this collection. This is by Flannery O'Connor. I found the author overall to be somewhat passive-aggressive. She seemed to hate anyone who wasn't religious or especially Catholic. And it just felt very petty. It felt like she also had like issues with women, especially I would say her mother. It seemed like there were a lot of mom issues in this. And there was this motif of like kind of this annoying, ugly girl, like a daughter. I guess that was kind of her stand-in. But the collection, the first story is called A Good Man is Hard to Find. But I also looked at that with every other story in here. So I'm just going to briefly cover each story. I'm not spending a lot of time on this because I didn't fucking like it. Good Man. Basically, this grandma is bad. She ends up fucking over this family on a road trip, and they run into a guy called the Misfits, who's a killer. Ends up killing everyone because grandma can't shut the fuck up. So, did we find a good man in this story? No. River, this is about a child who's being babysat by a poor Christian woman, and then the Christian woman takes him to be baptized, and later on the child goes back there and ends up drowning in the river. So the river that baptized him kills him. There's this old guy, Mr. Paradise, who wants to give the kid some candy. He seems like a nice guy, and he tries to save the boy, but he doesn't save him. I guess he was a good man because he tried. The Life You Saved, this is about an old woman giving her kind of retarded daughter away to be cared for by this man who comes around the farm, and he fixes up a bunch of stuff. Turns out he's a bad man. He's a con man. Not a good man. A Stroke, this is about a fat woman named Ruby. She's walking her fat ass up these stairs. She doesn't want kids. She doesn't like God. She's bad. She's bad because she doesn't like God. And she's walking up these apartment stairs. She talks to some people. And then, yeah, she realizes that she's pregnant at the end. So I guess it's a haha fuck you from Flannery O'Connor. A Temple. There's this annoying little girl with braces. I guess this is the stand-in for the author. And her two female cousins come to visit, and she's just this miserable little grouch that runs around and is just gossipy. She imagines herself as a martyr. These boys are brought in to take her cousins out to a carnival. She's not invited to go. And the boys, they seem like decent Christian boys, but they take them to see like a hermaphrodite, carnival hermaphrodite. And it's, yeah, you know, they have the hermaphrodite say, "This is how God made me." And it felt like, yeah, Flannery is definitely not someone I would agree with, but it's like, oh, this poor tranny thing, whatever the fuck. I don't care. It's a monster. I don't care. Artificial Nigger. This old guy takes his grandson to a city. They get lost. They are very racist. You know, they end up being so lost that they end up in the black part of town, and they find salvation when they return to the white part of town. But the father is a bad man who renounces his son, and the grandson ends up lusting after a Negro woman. There's little drops of that in Flannery O'Connor stuff where it's just like, yeah, that felt like a very petty, like, oh, you're racist, but you know your grandson's going to race mix, you know. Kind of felt like that. A Circle, Mrs. Cope has a farm and an ugly daughter. 3 boys come in and they just fuck with them. They start a fire. That's it. No good men there. A Late Encounter. This Civil War officer he's fucking ancient, and his granddaughter is graduating from college, and it doesn't seem like he's a good man. His mind isn't really there. But on the bottom of 162, she's having a dream where she's thinking about just showing people how great her grandfather is. One night in her sleep, she screamed, see him, and she turned her head and found him sitting in his wheelchair behind her with a terrible expression on his face and with all his clothes off except for his general's hat, and she had waked up and had not dared to go back to sleep again that night. So I guess it's like a dream, but I don't know if she's just like, you know, putting that in like she was molested by this guy, or if the general who really likes pretty ladies would molest her if his body was still capable because he's a cripple. He dies at the end. Good Country People. There's Mrs. Hopewell. She has a daughter, Joy, who's a bitch. You know, that's a running theme. She has a fake leg and she's an atheist. This Bible salesman comes along and seems like he's good country people. Turns out he's not. He's a piece of shit. and he brings her up to this hayloft to have sex, ends up stealing her fake leg, and she's just left there because, I don't know, he's also not a good man. Displaced Person, this is about Mrs. Shortley, and Mrs. Shortley works on this farm for Mrs. McIntyre. She doesn't really like Catholics. She doesn't really like religious people, so therefore she's bad because this is Flannery O'Connor, so therefore she has to be bad. And these Polish people are being brought onto the farm to work, and Mrs. Shortley doesn't like that, and these are either they're just like Poles or they're Jewish Poles. I don't really know. It seems like they're talking about the Holocaust. So they could very well be Jews. And while the Polish man is a good hard worker, but he's a Catholic. And that sucks because Mrs. McIntyre doesn't see how good he is. He wants to marry his female cousin to one of the Negro farmhands. Like he shows a Negro farmhand a picture of his, white female cousin. And he wants to bring her over so that she can get married to the Negro. And at the end, the Polish man is killed by Mr. Shortley. And Mrs. Shortley had a stroke because Flannery O'Connor wants you to know that bad people get strokes and die in her book, in her short stories. And they end up killing the Pole at the end. And though Mrs. McIntyre ends up dying bad and alone, and isn't it horrible? Isn't she just horrible that they couldn't just let this good Catholic man just work in peace on this farm and let his cousin come over and just race mix with this Negro? Because he's a good man. He's one of the good men. Come on. We have Mr. Paradise. He's a good man. And we have the Displaced Person. He's a good man. So this is a book of shit. Fuck Flannery O'Connor, the fucking papist cunt. Next, we have Medieval Ireland. This is fucking boring. This is so fucking boring by Michael Richter. Go fuck yourself. I wanted stuff on Brian Boru. I wanted stuff about Vikings. I wanted stuff about battles. Instead, it's about like fucking Christianity and like language and crap. And none of that. It was all crap. Fuck you. I'm not in a good mood. Watership Down, the graphic novel. I like this one. I'm not going to speak on it too much, because I think I'd like to do a bigger video at some point where I've actually read the book, seen the movie again, and then talk about the graphic novel and just cover all of it. I would still recommend reading the book, even though I haven't read the book. I definitely want to, but this has great artwork. As I said, it's about rabbits that are on this journey to find a new warren. They have a bunch of enemies out in the world, but they're just trying to survive and to provide more for their people, right? Great artwork. It had some interesting, because the rabbits have their own mythology, some mythological stories that weren't in the movie that I thought were really cool. I think the book has even more of them. So I'll show off some of the artwork. If you've seen Watership Down the movie or read the book, definitely go with this. I don't think I'd recommend this to be the first thing you do for Watership Down. You could, but I feel like the book or the movie just has more, and this is a nice supplemental piece. You know what I mean? But it's pretty good on its own. But I feel like it's an adaptation, right? And there are stronger source materials. That's it. This is a mixed trough, to say the least. Sorry about the rants during the Jackalopians, but I felt like I should. I don't know. I wanted to say something. Sorry if that was cringy. Flannery O'Connor, yeah, it was very much not someone I like. I'll probably have a small trough video next week. I'll try to keep that to 30 minutes. This one probably went on for a bit. I'd say check out Watership Down. If you've never heard of it before, you could give the movie a go, give the book a go. And then if you have heard of those before and you want more, graphic novel's good. Jackalopians, I'm, as you could probably tell, mixed on it. I think, the humor's pretty good. Other aspects of it, I didn't really care for. So that's it. Thanks for watching. White Pill Media out.